Faster, higher, stronger. From boxing, soccer and athletics, to rugby, Gaelic games and horse racing. Irish athletes have been competing and winning at the highest level. But with victory now judged by the finest margins, natural talent and the will to win have been augmented by science and technology. Future success now demands our athletes achieve peak performance.
When I was growing up playing with Cork, it was all about getting to the All-Ireland final, because Croke Park, like it's our national theatre of dreams.
Growing up, it was something that was just all around me. And then obviously Kilkenny being reasonably successful where I'm from, for me it was I wanted to be my hero.
I used to go to the local disco. There'd be a national anthem playing at the end of the disco. I would stand with my hands behind my back, visualising standing in Croke Park, and I was standing with an Armagh team on an Ireland final day.
When I stood on the steps of the Hogan stand and raised that cup over my head, 20-something years had led me to that point, you know, because I had started playing camogie when I was 4 years old.
Huge sense of pride to seeing grown men cry after the match, to see an 80-year-old man to say, this is the best moment of my life.
You know, it's been 16 years since Dublin won an All-Ireland, and before we were in that chasing pack, we wanted to be at a Kerry, we wanted to be at a Tyrone, and now we were down at the top table, and I suppose everyone was gunning for us.
At the highest level of competitive sport, staying on top of the pile means staying ahead of your competition. In the modern era, that means being at the cutting edge.
Sports science encompasses all the key ingredients of sports preparation that accumulate in peak performance.
All the little add-ons in terms of medical support, S&C support, nutritional support. If you're going to survive in the environment of the All-Ireland Series, you know, everyone else is doing it, so you know you need to be up there as well.
When there's so little between teams nowadays, having that extra little bit is sometimes what separates the winners from the losers.
What's incredibly unique about the GAA is the parish.
It's about tradition. It's about representing where you come from.
My father played with the local club. Myself and my younger brother were always down around the club. There's a real sense of identity in the GAA, so it's something that's very difficult to recreate in other sports.
In Gaelic games, our heroes come from our own parish, inspiring us to believe that within every player is the possibility of future All-Ireland glory. But could the standards being set by the nation's elite be affecting the grassroots? Today's a big day for Cavan football as Mullahoran take on Cavan Gaels in the Spring League final. For a team of scientists, this is the perfect opportunity to run tests on club players to investigate the demands of the game on the body. They're looking at an enzyme called creatine kinase.
What I've been doing over the last number of years has been collecting data, more from a research perspective on creatine kinase. And now this has been our first opportunity. This is the next step, you know, it's bringing it from out of the lab into the real world.
So creatine kinase is a muscle protein, an enzyme that's involved in energy production. So the more energy our body accumulates, the more creatine kinase it uses. As the structure of the muscle becomes damaged, this enzyme that's normally inside the muscle leaks out. And because it leaks out, then the blood will clear that. And we can measure how much the blood is clearing, and it can give us an indicator of how much damage the muscle had. It's a finger prick. We take about 30 micromils of blood, and the machine then will measure the amount of creatine kinase in the blood.
We're going to do this pre-game, post directly after the game, and then 24 hours later, and 48 hours later, and 72 hours later. And we're going to track how the guys respond to the game and how they recover.
What's his last two numbers?
279.
The big thing today is being able to get an objective marker of the damage done to muscle and where a player is in the recovery. When you undertake a training session, you actually break down your body. And what the body does with appropriate rest, it actually compensates. But if you don't have the appropriate recovery, what happens is instead of getting this progressive upward and this progressive improvement in fitness, you're going in the opposite direction. You're going from overreaching to overtraining to burnout.
When we ran out onto a field, you ran out onto a field 10 minutes before a game and you had a puck around and maybe a little jog and a slight stretch and then into a match because you were conserving energy. You didn't want to be seen taking water because that was a sign if someone was taking water that they were tired. I suffered with hamstring injuries throughout my career, and once you got a hamstring injury, you were told that's it for 6 weeks. So at stages of my career, I wouldn't have trained from a Leinster semi-final to a Leinster final, and possibly from a Leinster final to an All-Ireland semi-final. And that would not work nowadays.
The ever-evolving world of sport tends to have its eyes firmly fixed on the future. But preserving our legacy is essential too. At Dublin City University, scientists are developing technology that will ensure the skills of our present GAA heroes are passed on to the next generation.
It's about digitally capturing the unique skills as performed by elite athletes so that we have those skills digitised in 3 dimensions for posterity.
So what we have here is we have a system of 12 cameras. We can have an accuracy of collecting where they are to a millimetre. So this basically is the same technology that would be used for motion capture in the film industry for Gollum in Lord of the Rings. But what we want to do with the replay system is try and replace this as best we can with a cheap alternative that everyone can have access to. So we took the Microsoft Kinect, which is around €100. It's a depth camera that can track the movement of the athlete. So our athletes could be just an average child who's interested in playing the sport, and they can go home, go onto the internet, load this system up and compare themselves to that national or local hero. And the first thing that we'll see now is a demonstration of the fist pass by John Doyle. And now we're going to count you down to do 2 trials.
Ideally, we'd like every club in Ireland to be able to capture their local heroes, because we know that particularly in traditional sports and games, children in particular aspire to play with and like their local heroes.
And here it comes up with a score for you.
At the end of the day, what we've developed here are low-cost platforms for motion capture.
And this is your score overall is 60%, and you get individual feedback. And they can compare themselves to the ideal technique, to a national hero, or to themselves, and they can track themselves over time, and they can see their improvements or not. Because one of the challenges is, how do athletes know they've improved?
Sometimes great strides in improvement requires nothing more than innovative thinking. Dr. Edward Collin has been challenging Dublin hurler Niall Corcoran to rethink how he uses his eyes during play.
In the case of visual skills training, for most athletes, there's massive gains to be made. It's the new frontier for performance. First of all, we're going to look at doing the non-dominant eye training with Niall, and Niall's dominant eye is his right eye. So to get the effect that we want from training like this, you then want to cover the dominant eye. Okay, so Niall, nice quick hands, get it back to me as quick as you can. What we're hoping to do is to kickstart any of the neural mechanisms that normally happen first with the dominant eye, his right eye, but now for it to happen with his left eye. That's good, hands, very good. We can train the left eye, the non-dominant eye, to actually pick up that information just as quickly as the dominant eye.
You know, it's about decision-making, and you look at all the best GAA players, and they're always the players who make the best decisions under pressure. And really, to make the best decisions, you have to have time on the ball.
Okay. At first touch is critical. When you're talking about the elite level of sport, everything happens fast. If you can impact on an athlete's performance in those fractions of a second, you'll change the game for them. If you're having to track the ball all the ways in, all the ways down to here, where you have to then get to here before getting it into your hand, that's taking you out of the game for anything from 250 to 300 milliseconds, which is huge, as you know, at the elite level of hurling. As opposed to saying, if I can anticipate by judging where it's bouncing, the flight of the ball, then I'm actually not having to take myself out of the game. I'm actually able to catch it like this. I'm not having to look down at my hand, and I'm never out of the game. And one of the most effective tools for that are what we call chin-up occlusion goggles.
So now all I can see is directly what's in front of my eyes. Anything below that, I can't see.
Nice. You have to then start reading the direction of that ball a lot earlier, because you won't be able to see it when it's closer to the body. And again, let's go. Focus in nice and early.
So you can imagine a 10, 11, 12-year-old obtaining this type of practice from that age. I wish, I had this 10 years ago. I can only imagine where I'd be now as a player.
Urgency, get that game speed. Context is critical here. And again, the best athletes never stop looking for the next level. And if you as a coach are able to provide them with a stimulus that thinks that there is another level, that's where that cycle of progression just keeps going and going. The results are magical, because then they start doing things on the field, on the court, on the course that they never thought that they could do.
When I think back in 2014, I suppose press rewind from the time I stood on the steps of the Hogan stand and raised the O'Duffy Cup over my head to pre-season training way back in early January. And you think about all the sacrifices I built my life around camogie. I probably, career-wise, took a step back because I needed to make sure that I could give everything to my team and everything to my sport.
We're asking Gaelic footballers to be peak performers. The problem is there's too little hours in the week, so we're at a breaking point. Something has to change.
And it's not fair to just treat them like professionals and put professional demands on them, because they don't have the same time to rest and recuperate.
The professional that's built into their days. They have that 6 hours in the middle of the day to do their rehab, to do their pool sessions, whereas GAA players are off working or they're in college.
At the Mullahoran Cavan Gales match, scientists, led by Professor Niall Moyna, are conducting a unique study. By monitoring the level of the enzyme creatine kinase in players' blood, they'll be able to determine the demands a game has on the body.
Up until quite recently, the mantra in Ireland at intercounty or club level was, well, if the county team next year is training 4 nights a week, maybe if we train 6 nights a week or 8 nights a week, we'll be twice as good. And that was the mentality. I mean, that's science tells us the total opposite. We have to be more prudent in how we approach the preparation of our teams, because if they're training more than twice a week, they're probably not getting the appropriate recovery. And that was where I saw the role of creatine kinase, was in allowing coaches to see the amount of damage and then to be able to individually tailor the recovery until they were in a certain, the creatine kinase was back within a certain range, clearly indicating that their body had recovered. The physical manifestations of this overtraining with inappropriate recovery is beginning to manifest itself at much earlier ages. Many of the players, prior to finishing their playing careers in an amateur sport, are already candidates for hip and knee transplants. Unlike professional players, Gaelic Games players don't get the opportunity to go home in the afternoon and go for a nap. But in every other aspect of their life, they're being asked to train like a professional athlete, and that is not simply sustainable.
So burnout has been a big issue in Gaelic Games over the last 10 or 15 years, arguably. Now, thankfully, because there's much more sports science, we're starting to get much better at understanding the training load. Now, have we arrived? No. We're still a long way behind where we need to be. Now, at least there's an acceptance that we've got a problem. We need to deal with the problem by educating more, by getting the coaches to realise that they have a responsibility to manage the workload of the players.
In County Cavan, Mullahoran have won their first silverware of the season. But how has the match affected their bodies? Before throw-in, Professor Niall Moynihan's team took blood samples from the players to study creatine kinase levels, an enzyme that indicates muscle damage. Running the same test post-match will allow them to get an objective view on the stress of the game.
And it will probably now increase because of the trauma, and we'll even see a bigger increase tomorrow. And every player won't change the same. Some players will see a big change, other players virtually no change.
Yeah, so if you just do a squat, and then when it goes back, and see then how sore you find it, 0 being no pain, 100 being the worst pain imaginable.
You go to a player 48 hours before they are in a final and you say, how do you feel? I can rest assure you, 100% of players are going to tell you they feel wonderful. But in fact, they may not be. And here's a simple test that will allow us, it's not the absolute answer, but it's part of the armamentarium now that coaches have to enable them to make sure that every single player, when they cross the white line, are optimally prepared for competition. And that's what this is about. For me, I think this, because we're able to take a portable device and do this, I think it'll be one of the most transformative changes, I think, in team-based sports. The modern coach, the 21st century coach at all levels has to buy into this, because otherwise he or she is going to be left behind.
So I played with Kilkenny from 1988 until 2005. I'm trying to think, did I ever see a video analysis of a game? I don't think I did with Kilkenny.
In my latter years playing with Cork, video analysis and statistics would have been a massive part of your preparation. There was no longer, I suppose, the opportunity to hide. So there was no such thing anymore as, well, aren't I running around the field and I look great, but how many plays were you involved in? How many hooks did you get in? How many times did you chase back your player? Were you in the right position when you needed to be?
Having truly embraced the gains that sports science and performance analysis can bring, 2016 sees Cork Camogie shooting for a remarkable third All-Ireland title in a row. But not so long ago, things were different.
With Cork Camogie 5 years now, and I suppose I took over, and we had situations coming to matches where girls were probably out the night before, and there was a good bit of changing there,
I think definitely sports science and technology has brought a lot to the game in the last few years, and we're definitely using it more with regards to video analysis, and even, as I was saying, strength and conditioning, and just with regards to diet as well.
In-game analysis as such is working with the management team during a game, tagging particular events with the performance software. KPIs are key performance indicators, so they're aspects of the game that we want to particularly track. It might be turnovers during the game, it might be possession retention during the game, it could be scoreable opportunities. Then it's both related to the management, it's also related to the players that certain aspects of the game need to be improved. The scoreline only contains value at one particular point in the game, and that's at the end, while all these KPIs contain a lot more value throughout the game as indicators of how your team is actually performing and also how the opposition are performing.
If we do win the ruck ball, I'd like to focus on what we're doing with the ball again, because against Wexford...
That's actually true, because if you look at our previous game, after the game, I run a number of different reports. I will upload the actual video with the events to the cloud system, where the players could then log in, could watch their own particular events, could see their own stats, etc. I might actually just show you there, lads, some video clips I put together of the ruck ball the last day.
So now if you wanted to work on something, if you were, say, weak catching in the air, you'll be able to look at those, say, individual clips. I suppose, just working on your weaknesses, it definitely does help to improve that area.
What I'm actually looking for is the most basic thing that we didn't do was actually demanding the ball from the person. Is it coincidental that Cork have won the last 2 All-Irelands? People might say so, but we believe that there is a strong element of what we're doing professionally speaking as a management and for the players, that we do think that is having a role to play.
No one goes anywhere standing still. We're certainly not standing still. We're looking for that edge, and performance analysis is something that is assisting us getting that edge.
At DCU, the creatine kinase results are now in. Having retested the Mullahoran GAA players 24, 48 and 72 hours after the match, there's now a unique player-by-player breakdown of the muscle damage endured during a game and the speed of the recovery process.
He was our
highest responder.
Right, like that's really high, going from a baseline of around 200 all the way up to almost 1,800. It gives you a much better picture for each individual athlete and allows you to better individually prescribe training rather than a one-size-fits-all approach that we've used for many years. I thought that would be a wee bit higher. So we were able to identify 3 players in that squad who certainly were not ready to undertake a difficult training session 72 hours after the game. And what happens is that they're now in what we call the overreaching phase, where they're not getting appropriate recovery and their performance will start to deteriorate. And they're all of a sudden they go from overreaching to overtraining. And at that stage, they've dramatically increased the risk for injuries as well. It all looks good. Someone's wearing a GPS and we're drawing blood and taking heart rates. It looks great. But is it making a difference to performances? And if it's not, then we have a problem. Particularly for club players, it's simple technology, it's easy to use, and I think it will have a profound effect, I think, going forward on how we train and play our games. I don't know of any other team sport in the world, both professional and amateur, that trains harder than GAA, or not necessarily harder, but trains more often than GAA players. So I would hope this technology in the short to medium term will result in a reduction in collective training time and maximising the time that we actually have to maximise performance.
In sports science and in technology specifically, the one thing we can guarantee is there's going to be improvements. It will never happen as somebody says, we've reached the peak. There is massive room for improvement in all aspects of sports science. I get hugely excited about that. And the real engineers of sport, the real architects of sport, they're always thinking about the next frontier.
In Claremorris, County Mayo, Connacht GAA are exploring that new frontier. Their Centre of Excellence is the first in the country to offer a centralised sports science service for an entire province. Today, the Leitrim Under-16 football team is here for a check-up.
We have all the counties from under 18 down working out of the centre here, getting their programmes, doing video analysis, doing their fitness testing and screening.
Okay, bar on top of the head, bar down.
Each of the 5 counties would not have the financial clout to run a facility like this on their own. From the fitness testing, any weaknesses or imbalances in their movement, we can put a correct programme in place that will ultimately help the player stay on the field and perform to the maximum.
Head up, chest out, and over there.
In addition to regular fitness tests, youth teams are monitoring their own exercise loads with a view to reducing overtraining and potential burnout. They simply open an app every evening and answer 5 simple questions.
So on the activity questionnaire, the first question is what type of training were you doing? So was it a training on the field, a match, gym session? Second question, who the activity was for. So was it a school, club, college or county? Next one is the sport. So is it football, hurling, soccer, rugby? So I suppose the beauty with this is it takes each player 30 seconds to fill it out every evening, and then they save it and goes into a report which the coaches can look at regularly. All the players that we work with, they're looking to get to senior level, win a Connacht Championship and ultimately to win an All-Ireland. And if we here at Connacht GAA can assist in any way in doing that, that would be great.
From a supporter's point of view, we're demanding the best. So we're demanding absolute professionalism from our players.
We strive to be a high-performing athlete. There's a level of expectation from the players there as well. They're ultimately dedicating, their lives to this, really.
So when people say it's for the love of the game, it really is for the love of the game. I mean, when I was playing camogie, there was no expenses involved for camogie players. There was no media attention as such. There was no perks or benefits in kind or lavish holidays. You did it because you wanted to represent your county.